Dragon Ballers, if you're looking to buy Dragon Ball Super or One Piece sealed product, make sure to get 5% off using my link to Mystic TCG down in the description. You can also sell cards to them using their Facebook link, which is also down in the description. Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. It is my favorite time of the season as a YouTube content creator for a card game, and that is ban list season. We got the Set 20 Power Absorb ban list at 11 p.m. Eastern on a Tuesday. This came out last night, so some of you guys may be waking up to interesting news. I won't say good or bad because this ban list is very, very polarizing to say the least. But yeah, this was done very strangely because, again, 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, like, I don't know if this was rushed. I mean, the results of the ban list make it feel like it was rushed, but I'm sure they must have debated on this for some amount of time leading up to it. I know that the release of the ban list was kind of weird because we had Worlds so close to the actual release of Set 20, so I'm sure they wanted to wait a little bit just to see if anything outlandish came out within the World Championship itself. But there's actually no hits to yellow on this ban list, surprisingly, so that obviously didn't have much of an influence for them. But yeah, we're just gonna get into this ban list. Again, it is a doozy. It is very polarizing, I guess is the best word I can use for it. Some people would say it's probably rage inducing. I was one of those people last night, I'll be honest with you guys, but we'll go through all this. We'll talk about why you know, some people might not be so happy with it, but if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video, and of course, as always, leave your thoughts on this ban list down in the description. What do you like? What do you dislike? What do you wish was on the ban list that isn't? Let me know all those kinds of things. But anyways, let's jump right into it. We have BT20 limited errata card update. Hello, Dragon Ball Super card game fans. With the release of BT20 Power Absorbed, 3 ban cards, 1 limited card, and 2 errata cards will be added to the ban limited errata card list. 1 card will also be removed from the ban list. That's always very interesting. Gets a lot of people hyped up. These changes are effective the release date of BT20 in your respective region, which for North America at the very least is this coming Friday. So this is going into effect very, very soon. Again, this is the closest we've ever got a ban list to an actual set release. Normally we have like 3 weeks of playtesting with the full set revealed and the contents of the ban list known leading into a set. So this set is going to be a bit more fresh, to be honest, because of those changes and with how close they are to the actual set release. So all right, ban cards, we have BT16 Goku Crimson Warrior. So they finally decided to do it instead of, you know, with the errata they went with last set. They're just going full out with the ban on Crimson, and I think this is actually a good hit. Crimson is definitely the most popular deck in the current format, and while we have recently been discovering it has answers, they're not necessarily answers that are probably best for overall health of the metagame, because what we've seen as a good answer to Crimson are these decks that are very, very stally and basically prevent the combo step as much as possible so that Crimson can't get awakened. That's the main thing we've seen in terms of a Crimson counter, and I gotta say that just leads to a very unfun gameplay patterns where the game just gets dragged out super long. For one thing, we already have a problem with games going into time at, you know, competitive regionals and whatnot. We don't need the other decks being, you know, basically propelled to the forefront of the meta because they counter Crimson in such effective ways. So with Crimson gone, I mean, I'm sure we'll see people trying out other blue leaders. Obviously, Android 21 is a very popular one out of Set 20. Maybe some people will take a look at like Soul Striker. I think Soul Striker's problem is going to be Self-Awakening though, because Crimson's main thing was that it had Self-Awaken built in. So you, as long as you get to a combo step, you couldn't really get stalled. Soul Striker's now the problem of having to actually play Self-Awakeners in the main deck if the opponents are not being aggressive enough with the Soul Striker player's life. So that's definitely going to be a downgrade. Maybe you can just play some of the similar stuff that Crimson played in a Soul Striker deck, and maybe it'll be okay. And that might even be a bit more true if we do kind of regress back to an aggro meta, because Crimson really did check a lot of aggro. Like, the main aggro right now is Sin Shenron, SS4 Gogeta, and Black Spring Kai of Time, all of which Crimson can do fairly well against. I mean, in terms of the red matchups, I think Crimson pretty much just stomped those. Spring Kai of Time is a little bit tougher because it was always tough for blue, namely Crimson, to deal with Kai's board, especially if they went second. You know, your only answer really is like Beerus Area Annihilator, to which Spring Kai of Time actually has solid answers. So that's just a little bit about that matchup. But with the check to aggro being banned in the form of Crimson, maybe we see a bit more of an aggro meta, because those aggro decks that I named do check the hardcore control decks, like the Bulmas, like the Golden Friezas, maybe like the Trunks Jetas, and maybe even like Android 21 coming out in Set 20. Those are just my running thoughts right now, but overall I do think this is a good hit. The next hits we have are Further Construction Champa and Hidden Power East Supreme Kai. So they finally went ahead and banned the cards that just grant anything in the game double strike. This is a hit that I talked about several sets ago, because there was a point in like the end of the Unison Warrior block where all these archetypes were just getting their own in archetype forms of double strike granters. So it almost led me to believe that, like, okay, Bandai is designing this in a certain way where they want cards, or archetypes rather, to have their own form of double strike, so that not every strategy can just splash a Champa. But they didn't do that. They've done it here, though. They've done it, like, you know, probably 5 sets later, if that. So I don't really get this one, to be completely honest with you. Like, why now of all times? It doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. Again, when we are having issues with games going to time in this, you know, rather blue mid-range control format, like, taking Champa out of the equation is definitely just going to elongate games. It's not going to do anything to fix that time issue. But the interesting thing here is that, like, the red decks didn't need Champa. Like, SS4 Gogeta, a lot of builds did not even play Champa, nor do they need to at all. Sin Shenron, same thing. Every single battle card that matters for the most part in that deck has double strike or triple strike. So Champa and Kai were not important in that deck either. Spring Kai Time pretty much didn't want to play Champa because you can't really afford to mill a non-black card. Again, nor does Kai need it. So where Champa and East Kai really shined were in the mid-range decks that didn't really have, like, the super aggro option or the automatic winning boss monster option. It was in these mid-range decks, very much like Crimson, maybe your other yellow mid-range decks like Golden Frieza, Trunks Vegeta, that just needed a way to, like, dump their entire hand on 2 life, basically. So they've taken that out of the game. It is kind of a good thing in one sense, where you don't have to super stress if your opponent has the double strike granter. So you can just play knowing that, like, okay, if that card has single strike, I'm going down to 1 life instead of 2. You can play with that security, which does feel nice in one aspect. And I don't want to just put the full forefront of the weight of games going to time on the back of Champa and Kai. That those cards are not necessarily the reason why the game is going into time so much. It's because of the format. Again, Crimson, super defensive, very hard to kill. That's why games are very elongated, and now that leader is gone. But with that leader being gone, the strategy of just, like, playing the most combo power in the game in a blue deck doesn't necessarily go away either. That's kind of one of the reasons why I mentioned possibly banning UI Kamehameha, was to maybe do something to that type of strategy. I guess we'll have to just see if any other blue leader can actually facilitate that strategy. That's something we'll have to kind of wait and see for. But yeah, those are just my thoughts on the double strike stuff. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I'm kind of indifferent about it, to be honest. I don't think it matters all that much. Unfortunately, the very nice alt art Champas that are in most of my decks, you're gonna have to go back into the collection binder, but it is what it is. All right, next up, we have the first limited card, which is Majin Buu Assault of the Agents of Destruction. So this is one that, again, lots of players have been calling for a long time, but this is one that I actually let up on recently because we've gotten so many more answers to Buu. Like, green just kills this thing on the spot, no questions asked. We've got several SCRs for multiple colors now that can also deal with it very effectively. Don't forget that if you really wanted to deal with a high cost Unison, you could always just play Spring Kai Time SCR. That was always an option for you. Granted, like, the other SCRs within the color pools, like those color specific SCRs, generally much more powerful than Kai, but, like, Kai always was an option for dealing with Unisons like that. But regardless, this card is now limited to 1. So the way this kind of works is, like, if your opponent happens to draw the 1 Buu Unison on, like, turn 4 or 4 energy, whatever, if they ramped, you deal with the 1 and now it's gone for the rest of the game. And that actually is a pretty good feeling, I won't lie. This is a limit that I actually don't mind. I do like this quite a bit. This is another really good hit. The problem here, though, is what's not on this ban list. There's no hit to SS4 Vegeta Rise of the Super Warrior, which means that with God Sealing gone still, that card is further unchecked. And now with Crimson gone, the first thing I think that makes sense to do is for players to go and look at these blue ramp strategies that, again, are unchecked by God Sealing, but also now just, like, might become the blue decks because Crimson's gone. Again, until someone maybe finds a strategy of, like, you know, best combo centric blue deck that counters the red decks. I do think the ramp decks are going to struggle against the red and the black decks because they're much slower, need much more time to set up, and can take a lot of damage while setting up. That's definitely something that I can foresee. But I still do think that ramping 4 energy on turn 4 is definitely a bit much, especially when Turning the Tide is also still in the game. That card was not hit either, and it's kind of weird in my opinion, the logic of, like, hitting the double strike granters, which are, you know, a game ender in and of themselves, but not hitting Turning the Tide, which is also a game ender, and a much more guaranteed game ender at that. And yes, you could say that Tide comes out much later in the game, but it's not that much later. Like, you can realistically drop Tide on like turn 5, which is, you know, most games I would say go to turn 4, depending on matchups you're playing. Obviously, if it's like red versus black, you're probably playing a turn 3 game, or maybe turn 4 game. If you're playing blue versus blue, you're probably playing a turn 8 game. But I would say on average, games are running around turn 4, turn 5, and Tide is not some like super far off, like I ramped 3 turns in a row card to play. Tide is like, I ramped once, played some floodgates, now I get to play Tide. So it feels like too much payoff for too little cost, or too little investment, I guess you could say. And what's funny too is that Boo Unison was a really good check to Tide, and now that that card's gone, Tide is going to be a bit more of an auto kill the turn it's played. Because if you just like had no board of your own as a blue ramp deck and played Tide into a Boo Unison, it wasn't a great play, because the Boo Unison just defends the Tide and your leader swing, so you wouldn't even kill your opponent through that. Now it goes back to their turn, they get a draw off leader, draw for turn, and draw off Boo Unison. So they actually kind of hit an answer to Tide, which is funny. But yeah, those are the 2 cards that definitely should have been on this ban list, and unfortunately are not. I know some people are definitely in the comments saying that yellow should have received some hits, but like, again, I just defer to what I said in the World Championship breakdown video, where yes, yellow won the World Championship, but it was a deck that was very specifically dedicated to countering Crimson. That's not reflective of the entire metagame as a whole. So I think with aggro still being in its current state, not getting further nerfed into set 20, I think that those sort of long game control decks are going to take beatings from the aggro decks. That's just my prediction, at least. But anyways, all this errata stuff is just clarification for set 20 cards. Not a big deal. The one thing that is really interesting is they are taking Secret Identity Masked Saiyan off of the ban list. Now let's kind of look back a little bit. They banned this card. I don't remember exactly what set, but it was whatever set that the black token Toa deck came out. They banned Secret ID because it would have just absolutely annihilated that deck. Like, this thing is a token sweeper. That deck revolved around tokens. Was not going to be a good time for the Toa token deck. So that deck pretty much dead on arrival, never really did all that much. So Secret ID is now back, and what's funny is Bulma just won the first regional post World Championship, so this card is pretty decent against Bulma. They still have, of course, 4 copies of Mai, which are barrier blockers. This doesn't do much to that, but it does hit their other blockers, their Videls, their Bunny Girl Bulmas, and stuff like that. So is this going to just straight up replace Dark Broly as the overwhelm of choice? I'd probably say so, because typically Dark Broly's best use case is when it's hitting a blocker negate, and Secret ID does that and hits other things on the board. The only thing Secret ID doesn't do is like remove Secrets off the board, which is actually kind of relevant in the Crimson Mirror. Like, if my opponent played Gohan Beast, I need to be able to get that off the board before they have a chance to use the Activate Battle. That was a situation where Dark Bully was really good. Of course, you can do that in other ways, and Secret ID is probably still the SCR of choice for the granted flexibility, but I think it is going to be a deck building decision as to whether you play Dark Broly, which has 5k more battle power. That's definitely a big deal, and hits higher cost cards. But then Secret ID, of course, having the board wipe is going to be nice against aggro decks that play more low to the ground cards. Like in Sin, for example, you can hit their 4-drops in Shenron, and you can hit a Rush Attack Vegeta. That's pretty good. But anyways, guys, those are my thoughts on the ban list. I'm definitely frustrated they didn't hit certain things. I do think the hits they did make are pretty solid, so I want to give them some benefit of the doubt for that. But of course, let me know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.